Hi everyone, and welcome to week 2 of our data exchange webinar series. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about getting onto the data exchange. So we will talk about how to get your MyGov ID, how to link in RAM, and how to access the data exchange. In our previous webinar, I introduced everyone to this document, the Data Exchange Quick Start Guide. This is a 5-page document that outlines the 11 key steps you need to follow to access and start using the data exchange. It includes links to all of the key resources you need to complete each step. And as you can see on the screen, it also includes a checklist, so you can check off when you've completed a specific step. So in our previous webinar, when I introduced everyone to the data exchange, I took you through step 1, access training materials and resources, and step 2, subscribe to keep updated. In today's webinar, we're going to cover the next 2 steps. So step 3 takes you through setting up a MyGov ID and setting up a MyGov ID account and linking your MyGov ID to your organization in RAM, the Relationship Authorization Manager. And then step 4 takes you through how to access the data exchange. So we're going to go through all of that now. This document, this is the first document that you need to use to start getting access to the data exchange. So it's called Getting Onto the Data Exchange. And basically it just outlines the whole process that you need to follow. So if you haven't got access to the data exchange yet, please download this document and follow the steps in it to obtain your MyGov ID, link to RAM, and access DEX. I'm going to go through this document now and we'll work our way through the key things that you need to do and the key information you need to do it. So the first step in this document is to set up your MyGov ID. For those who don't already know, MyGov ID is an app that you download on your phone. It's kind of like your digital identity. So think about the 100-point identity check that you often have to do when you open a new bank account or you're getting a Working with Children check. It's the same thing, but it's much easier because you can do it in an app on your phone. And the app enables you to prove your identity when you access the data exchange. So each time you log into the data exchange, you'll get a prompt on your phone to enter a 4-digit code into the app. And this helps prove that you are who you say you are and that you have permission to access the data exchange. So it's very similar to when you try to access a bank account online and you get a text message on your phone or you get a notification in an app on your phone. It's the same thing. It's just that verification to check that you are who you say you are and you have the authority to access the information you're about to see. So setting up your MyGov ID is probably the simplest part of this whole process of accessing DEX. There are just 3 easy steps that you need to follow. The first one is that you need to download the app onto your phone. The second one is that you need to follow the prompts in the app to enter your details. And then the third step is you need to add in your identity documents, the same as you would for a 100-point ID check. This next slide just provides a little bit more information for each step. So when you download the app, depending on what kind of phone you have, the app will be in either the Apple Store if you have an iPhone or your Google Play Store if you have an Android phone. Once the app is downloaded, you can just follow the prompts and enter your information. So you need to enter your full name, your date of birth, and your email address. When you enter your email address, you must use your personal email address. This is because MyGov ID is personal to you. It's your personal digital identity. If you leave your organization, for example, and you go and work somewhere else, you will still have your MyGov ID because it's yours. It's not your employer's. So you need to make sure that you use a personal email and not a work email or a shared email. Once you've entered that information, you can start to add your identity documents. So you need to upload at least 2 documents to do this. You can scan them through the app, or you can enter the information manually. The app will prompt you to do this. And you can see the list on the slide of the different types of documents that you can upload. So you can use your driver's license, your passport, a birth certificate, a visa, a citizen certificate, or a Medicare card, for example. One word of advice is if you decide to use your Medicare card as one of your identity documents, it must be the second document that you add. It can't be the first. I don't know why. I don't understand why. I just know that that's how it works. So if you are going to use your Medicare card as one of your identity documents, make sure you add another document first, like your driver's license, for example. So MyGov ID has two different identity strengths. So you can see at step 2, just by entering your name, your date of birth, and your email address, you will achieve a basic identity strength. And when you upload your documents, you'll then achieve a standard identity strength. You can access the data exchange with just a basic identity strength. So when it comes to uploading your documents, if there are lots of issues with them and no matter what you do, it just won't seem to work for you, you can just stick with a basic identity strength. So you don't have to upload anything if it's not working for you. Just a few more little pieces of information. So when you add your identity documents, the name in them must match the name you entered in the app. This is because the app is verifying your identity, so everything needs to be the same. So for me personally, my full name is Kathleen Blair, but everybody calls me Katie. So when I entered my personal information into the app, I had to make sure I wrote Kathleen Blair because that's the name that's on my driver's license and my Medicare card and my birth certificate, for example. So you need to make sure that all of that information matches in order for your MyGov ID app to work for you. I also want to make the point that MyGov ID and MyGov are not the same thing. It's very frustrating that they have very similar names, but we need to clarify that they are two very different products, I guess. So MyGov ID is an app that you download on your phone to prove who you are when you access government services. MyGov is an actual platform that you use to actually access government services. So for example, I use MyGov to do my tax every year and my Medicare data is all linked in there. But MyGov ID is completely separate to that. It's literally just an app to verify your identity. It doesn't do anything more than that. There are two really useful places you can go if you have any questions about MyGov ID. There is an FAQs document that we put together earlier this year. You can see that in the orange box on the slide. So you can download that from this slide. And if you have any questions about MyGov ID or RAM, hopefully the answer will be in there. You can also go directly to the MyGov ID website. So that website has a needs help section that has solutions to common troubleshooting problems. So if you're experiencing issues trying to verify your identity or you get an error message or anything like that, please go to that website and hopefully it will have a solution for you. So once you've got your MyGov ID, the next thing you need to do is link your organization in RAM. So RAM stands for Relationship Authorization Manager, and it basically lets you control who can access online government services on behalf of your organization. So in your organization, you might only have 2 staff who need to access the data exchange. So RAM lets you say, these are the only 2 people who can access DEX. Nobody else can. To link your organization in RAM, you must be a principal authority. So a principal authority is someone who is responsible for the organization. It could be a trustee, a director, a partner. You will need to figure out who this person is within your organization. There is lots of information on the RAM website about principal authorities. So you can click the link here for more information if needed. And yeah, you can click that link for more information. And if you're not sure who the person within your organization is the actual principal authority. Once you've figured that out, the principal authority can then head to the RAM website and they can click this other link here, Relationship Authorization Manager website, and they can follow the instructions there to link your organization in RAM. To do this, they must have a MyGov ID. So if you've set up your MyGov ID and then you realize that someone else is the principal authority and only they can link the organization in RAM, they will need to set up a MyGov ID as well. So the next step, once you've found your principal authority and they've linked your organization in RAM, now they can start authorizing staff to access the data exchange. So the link on this slide takes you to a web page with step-by-step instructions on how to do this. When the principal authority authorizes staff, they have 3 different options for how they can set staff up. So they could make someone an authorization administrator. So this means that another person can also authorize users, which might come in handy if your principal authority isn't around very often. Or they can just make them an authorized user. So this is just a standard user who can access specific services. They can also make someone a basic user. So if someone was struggling with their MyGov ID and they couldn't upload their identity documents, the principal authority can make them a basic user when they link them in RAM, and they'll still be able to access the data exchange. When your principal authority authorizes you, you will receive an email with a RAM authorization request. You need to accept this request within 7 days. If you don't, they will need to reissue the request. You also must have a MyGov ID to accept the authorization. So the email you receive will include a link to follow. You click on the link and you have to log in using your MyGov ID to prove that you are who you say you are. You enter the authorization code from your email, click submit. RAM will show you a summary of your access. So you should see Data Exchange Portal under the Department of Social Services. Tick the box that says I understand and accept the declaration, and then you can click accept, and done. You will be linked in RAM. So once that is all done, the next thing to do is to actually access the data exchange. So the first thing you need to do in this step is to complete a user access request form. So this form includes information about your organization, like your ABN. It also includes information about you, so your name, your email address. There is one field in this form that everyone seems to get tripped up on, and that is the funding identifier. So when you complete this form, you need to write in the funding identifier box, targeted early intervention or one of the TEI program activities. DSS won't accept an alphanumerical code, for example. You need to just say targeted early intervention or one of the program activities that your organization delivers. When the form is finished, there is a button down the bottom of it to email it to your manager. So this has to be somebody within your organization. So before DSS can approve it, it needs to go to somebody else within your organization to approve it. There's kind of like a double authentication step that DSS have put in place. And then once the manager has approved it, it will be sent to DSS, and then they can approve it. So when your manager receives it, there is a URL in the email that expires after 7 days. So your manager has to approve the form within 7 days, or the request will need to be resubmitted. And then once your manager has submitted it, it will be received by the help desk. There is no expiry on that request, so they'll process it and approve it. It could take up to 10 business days, so please take that into account with implementing this process. And then once DSS have done that, you'll receive a notification via email that it's been approved. So once the form is approved, you will become your organization's organization administrator. So this means you can set up your organization in the data exchange and you can add new users. So instead of every single staff member having to complete that user access request form, you can just add them to the data exchange yourself, which is much easier. So there is a task card that shows you how to do this. This is called the Add and Edit a User task card. So you can follow the steps in this document to add other staff members to the data exchange. So when you log onto DEX for the first time, there are some specific steps that you need to follow. This applies to all users. So if you're the first user who completed the user access request form, or if you're a subsequent user who was given access by the organization administrator, you will need to follow this process the first time you log into the data exchange. So the steps for this are outlined in the document I mentioned earlier, getting onto the data exchange. You just need to follow the process in that document. You can see there's some screenshots on the slide there, and the document takes you through step by step exactly what you need to do, where to click, everything. So I'm not going to go through this now because hopefully everyone can just follow the steps in that document and you will be all good. And then once you've done that, you should be ready to go to start accessing the data exchange. And you can see the image on the screen there is a screenshot of what your little dashboard will look like. In the coming weeks, I'll show you guys how to actually start to use that. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone of some of the key resources that are available for you about getting onto the data exchange. So the main document is the one I've mentioned a couple of times now, getting onto the data exchange. It goes through all of the steps I've taken you through today, and it's broken down into 3 key parts. So you can just work your way through those steps. The other 2 are both FAQ documents. These take a look at please take a look at these if you have any questions about what I've discussed today, if you have any issues with following the process, or if you just want to know a little bit more about MyGov ID and RAM and the data exchange. We have tried to include as many questions as possible that we've been asked over the last 12 months. So hopefully it will address any issues that you have. And then on the right, we have the add and edit a user task card that I mentioned as well for those organization administrators who are ready to add other users. So I showed you guys all of this in our previous webinar. These are just all of the places you can go if you need help. So there is the DSS website and the DSS helpline. If you have problems with your MyGov ID and RAM, please do not call the DSS helpline. You should call the MyGov ID and RAM support line. They're run by 2 different departments. So DSS manage the data exchange portal, but MyGov ID and RAM are separate to that. So they have a separate support line. I know it is very confusing, but if your issue is specifically with MyGov ID or RAM, make sure you call this support line here, the 1300 number. If your issue is with the data exchange platform itself, then you can call the DSS helpline. And there's also the help pages that you can go to if you have issues with your MyGov ID as well. And then as always, if you're not getting anywhere with any of those helplines, you can contact the TEI inbox and we will help you figure out what the problem is and help you try to address it. So that's it for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. Our next webinar is on setting up your organization and creating outlets in the data exchange. I will hopefully see you there. Thanks again.